Hi everyone, a very good evening to you all. I'm Ghazal Jain, Associate Fund Manager, Alternative Investments, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this exclusive webinar with Mr. Saurabh Gupta, Fund Manager Equity. Before we get started with the presentation, I request your kind attention for an announcement we'd like to make. Saurabh joined Quantum AMC in 2011 and became Fund Manager of Quantum Tax Saving Fund in 2016. The Quantum Tax Saving Fund, as you know, is also managed in the identical value style as our Quantum Long-Term Equity Value Fund. In line with this, Saurabh, with his overall 14 years of experience and strong track record, has taken over from Mr. Atul Kumar as co-fund manager of Quantum Long-Term Equity Value Fund effective December 1st, 2020. Nilesh Shetty, who has been managing the fund since 2011, will continue in his position as co-fund manager of the Quantum Long-Term Equity Value Fund. Thank you for your attention. Now, getting back to today's discussion. Well, the market has rallied despite economic parameters signaling otherwise. Sensex has crossed 45K today. And the big question now is, in this new normal, will the age-old and proven strategy of value investing make a comeback? Saurabh will be talking to us just about that. So what is the outlook for equity markets? What should a long-term investor do? Why are value funds set to outperform the markets? And is this the right time to invest in value funds like QLTEF and Quantum Tax Saving Fund? Saurabh will be answering all these questions and more live questions post the presentation. So we encourage you to send across your questions in the chat. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Over to you, Saurabh.
Thank you, Ghazal, and thank you for a generous introduction. As you said, people would be waiting to understand our value funds make a comeback and a lot of questions on the equity strategy and long-term investing. So I'd like to just start off with the presentation. It's a brief presentation about, I'll spend 25-30 minutes on the presentation, and then we can take question and answers from everyone, whatever questions they do have. So can you move to the next slide, please? So value style has been under question for now good 2-3 years when value style has underperformed growth style. And the questions being put to us is that whether value investing will come back, or it's kind of, if I can use the word, dead. There are a lot of questions of those kind we have been receiving. So I thought this is the most pertinent question, and to start the presentation, I would like to just spend some time over here. So as you know, nobody of us would have a crystal ball to understand whether the value funds will do well from here on or growth fund will do well. What we can do is that we will just look at history and when value did better than growth and when it did not, and what were the macro parameters at that point in time when value did better than growth and vice versa. So on the slide number 3, as being shown to you, value versus growth, I took a 10-year period, 2010 and till 2019. And I've compared, if you look at the orange line, that is the growth index, MSCI growth index global. That was available. The India specific growth and value indices are not available. So MSCI World Growth Index has outperformed the MSCI World Value Index. And if you look at from 2017 onwards, the difference has been stark. And that is the reason why, even if you look at quantum mutual fund, last 2-3 years have not been that great in terms of performance. Can we move to the next slide? So now look at this slide. This is a period from 2000 till 2009. This period, you look at the yellow line, the black line has outperformed the orange line. So value has done better, much better than the growth index. So clearly from a 10-year perspective, from 2000 to 2009 and 2010 till 2020, there was a clear difference when value did well and when growth did well. So what we did was, we tried to pull out the macro environment in both these decades and trying to find out reasons why value or growth did well in different environments, and are the macro environments falling in place for the value style. Yeah. So we did pull out some data points. So last 10 years, if you look at from 2010 till 2020, last 10 years are characterized by low global growth. So global growth, if you look at the data point, average global GDP growth rate from 2010 to 20 has been 1.9%. And low inflation. Look at the inflation number, average inflation, global inflation. I've used the US as benchmark at 1.7%, and remarkably lower interest rates. Average 10-year GSEC yield in US was 2.2. Vis-a-vis, if you compare these figures for 2000 to 2010, the average global GDP growth was much better. The yields were higher, almost double the US 10-year yields. Average inflation was higher in US in the last 10 years. So it appears to be very counterintuitive that in a higher growth environment of 2000 till 2009, value did better. In a low growth environment, actually, the growth investing did better. Now, what are the reasons for that? If you move to the next slide. Yeah. Now, what happens is, if you look at last 10 years, when the growth was not that great, and specifically last 4 years, even in India, the growth started to lag. What happens is companies that gain market share can only grow. Right? In a cyclical recovery, when everything is doing good, all kind of companies start to do better, and not specific, and companies, even if they don't gain market share, they will grow. But in a growth starved world, even the companies which has ability to grow faster are those who can gain market share with different kind of modes. Now add to the environment where the interest rates are low and there is a lot of liquidity and only few companies are growing. So what happens is that there is a concentrated rally and a lot of money is following very few stocks. And that is what has happened over last 3-5 years, where the rally is getting concentrated into lesser and lesser number of names because of lack of broad recovery and lot of languishing companies where the catalysts are there, but because the cyclical recovery globally or in India is not happening, those companies are not doing well. So that what explains that growth strategy, which has a little kind of, if I can say, little threshold of judging companies by valuations, start to do well because they believe in quality at any price, whereas value believes quality at a certain price. So that is how the thought process is different. And that is the reason why last 5 years and maybe last 10 years, growth strategies have done better compared to value strategies. Now, is the cycle turning? Now, if you look at post-COVID, things have been again in favor of growth, but last 3 months, and I've circled that in red, the value seems to be bottoming out and coming back. The reason why it is coming back is, if you look at globally sectors, inflation seems to be making a comeback, though liquidity is still very high, but inflation is coming back. There seems to be a cyclical recovery across sectors. Now, technology seems to be doing well. Plus, if you look at commodities, they are doing well. Pharma has come back. So the rally is broad-basing, the growth is broad-basing. And in this environment, if we have picked up right companies in sector which was languishing for 1-2 years at good value, you'll see those catalysts playing out and value strategies start to outperform. We have already started to see that in last 3 months. We'll be keeping a close watch on how inflation moves, how liquidity moves, and the cyclical recovery sustains globally and in India. And if that is the case, we believe the value strategy is here to make a comeback. Next slide, please. So I'll just move on to how we view the Indian economy and the stock market right now. So this is like once a century event that has happened this year. So if you look at the dark blue line, that is India's active cases or kind of COVID cases that India has been adding, and it peaked in September and that's steadying down. So that is a very heartening news, with a very, very sharp spike till September, October. That number has started to improve, which is very, very heartening. If you look at other developed world, specifically Europe and US, they are clearly seeing a second wave, and that wave has been really harsh for them. They are counting more than US is counting more than 1 lakh active new positive cases every day, where India it has fallen to 45,000. Now you can debate about number of testing and other things, but we are just here to present data, and we can question data a lot of times, but as of now we are relying on this data. So US and Europe is facing a second wave. India, as of now, the first wave seems to be ending. Some of the northern states like Delhi, Punjab, Rajasthan are witnessing a spike. But as of now, from an all India perspective, the active cases after peaking to 1 million now are around 500,000 and appears manageable. Winters are coming. The cases we also could have second wave till the time vaccine reaches us, because it will take time to vaccine to scale up. So that is one of the risks which markets are not factoring, and we believe that needs to be taken a close watch. But as of now, things appear to be stable from a COVID perspective in India. Next slide, please. Now, economic indicators, these are monthly indicators that we track and they are easily available. Most of the indicators appear to have been stabilizing after the most strict lockdown. If you look at April, everything is red. Everything had just collapsed. Things were very, very negative, but thankfully things have improved remarkably well. And though even the quarterly GDP for last 2 quarters has been negative and technically it is a recession, but still we believe that recovery has been strong and things are improving from here on. The only data point which is uncomforting, if you look at the CMI unemployment data, which is the first row, September, October, November, that seems to be creeping a little high. And that is a very, very important variable, because if the economy is recovering, there has to be job creation and that will sustain the recovery. So that is a data point which is extremely important to have a close watch. So it was very, very bad in April and May from 20% unemployment, moved back. But again, September, October, November seems to be creeping up. And this is more so urban unemployment which is creeping up. And that is not a good news, because once the urban or the salaried class jobs go out, it is not easy that they come back. The rural or seasonal jobs, they come back every season. But salaried employee, or if I can call that white collar jobs, once that job goes out of the market, it is very difficult to get that job back, because companies have to be confident about their business to hire again. So that is one data point one has to be very, very careful. Otherwise, if you look at passenger vehicles, e-way bills, power demand, credit growth, everything seems to be on an upward trend. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this is the historical data. Indian consumer has been the backbone of Indian economy. If you look at from 2008 onwards, two-wheeler sales from 8 million moved to 24 million in 2019. 2020 slowed down a bit. 2021 has been a rough year. Things are improving, but it continues to be a rough year. Cell phone connections, passenger vehicles, look at these data points. It has been the real backbone of last 3-5 years. And this is the core reason why equity generates certain returns, because till the time Indian consumer continues to consume and buy products, company will start to do well. Companies will do well. They will have their stable margins and growth rates, and that will reflect in equity markets. Now, the question is, will it rebound from COVID? They have got a crude shock on COVID. Consumption fell April, May, seems to be coming back. Will it sustain? And what is driving this comeback of consumer demand is the question that we like to answer in the second slide. The next slide, sorry. Yeah. So we've always been saying that the government should have supported a bit more, though, but from a numbers perspective, they have announced a large stimulus package, but most of that package was either through credit or some other means, but not a cash dole out for the unemployed or the migrant labor. So that was one thing which was missing in this whole stimulus program. We can very well understand that the government's hands are also limited because their finances are also tight. Then what can revive this consumer market is one thing that is in our mind. So what we did was, though government has not given a lot of fiscal support, but definitely a fall in interest rates are lending a helping hand. So we just did the three kind of most common consumer loan that people take. If you had taken a 50 lakh rupee loan for 20 years for a new house in November 2019, that's a year ago, your EMI would have been 4,400 rupees, broadly speaking. That same amount of loan, now you can get at 38,465 rupees. So clearly about a 10% fall in your home loan EMI, right? So that you are saving. So you are saving about 5,000 rupees per month, right? Similarly, car loan, if you look at, there is a fall of about 5%. Personal loan, similar number. Now, what is happening is that if somebody has a home loan and his interest rates are fallen, he has a headroom to buy a car within ballpark the same, or 50% of his car loan EMI can be taken care by the reduction in interest rates by home loan. Or he can choose to buy a bigger house, a 10% bigger house with the same EMI which he could have paid, like very similar EMIs to what he was paying last year and this year. So this is clearly a positive, because now, fairly speaking, a lot of millennials think about expenses as EMIs and not absolute prices. So if my salary is say 100,000, earlier my EMI was 44,000 rupees. Now it's gone to 38,000. I have extra 5,000 rupees. I could save it. I could do an SIP, or I could do a car loan. So this is one trigger, because India, it has a latent demand for most of the things. In housing, we are one of the least penetrated. Car per 1,000 people is very, very less. Personal loans also, people have not taken too much. So that's also headroom that people can grow and consume. So this is giving a flip. We believe that a lot of things are moving. And if you look at even the real estate data, with the help of falling EMI, some discounts from developers, and further duty cuts by certain governments on registration, the volumes have picked up, right? So there is always a demand in India. You have to get the best price and comfort to the consumer, which we are seeing now, and that is leading to this revival. Next slide, please. So as this revival happened, we continue to believe that minus 21% of Q1 GDP, or minus 23%, minus 75%, this year can be a kind of write-off. As today morning RBI said that this year would be closer to minus 7.5. Next year, because of base effect, it could be double digit. But if you look at longer term averages, we believe that average is 6.5% of India for last 30-35 years. There could be some permanent nature of damage that has been happened because of lockdown and COVID. So from 23 to 25, GDP growth would move back to 5.5%, the real GDP. And from there on, we should revert back to 6.5% GDP. So no major change in a long-term trajectory of India's GDP growth, because fundamentals remain intact, hopefully. And we believe that government policies and other things remain constant and stable. No major jerk in terms of government policies. And we believe that we will revert back to this 5.5 to 6% real GDP growth rate. Next slide, please. Now, foreign capital is one big mover of the equity markets. And you look at this year has been phenomenal. In March, when there was a scare of whole COVID thing, everything collapsing, FIs pulled out $8 billion in March itself, and the market tanked. Come to November. This month, November month, they have put in $9.6 billion. Some of that is passive because of MSCI changes that has happened, but still, it's a staggering amount of money. If I look at this number, can we move to the next slide? Now look at this number, November 2020, this is the last row I'm talking about, it's $9.6 billion. If you look at CY16, from CY15, only CY19 is a year where we got a higher annual inflow of FPI compared to $9.6 billion. So 1 month of inflow in November is actually higher than four out of 5 years, last 5 years. So that is the kind of liquidity rush that you have seen. And that has resulted in equity markets moving up sharply in November, plus kind of double-digit equity returns in 1 month is something not very common. DII activity remains a little muted, and people, I think, want to book profit, or there could be a possibility that because of financial stress and salary cuts, people want more cash in their hand, and that is the reason that the DII or the mutual funds are still seeing some redemptions, and they're also selling out from their equity portfolios. Next slide, please. This chart looks a little a little scary from a PE multiple perspective. We are at like multi-year high in terms of PE multiples. But I like to highlight two things here. This looks overstated because there was a sharp decline in first quarter earnings because companies reported really bad numbers because of the lockdown. Once we normalize that, this 3 standard deviation of P multiples that you're seeing will look more better and constant. So that is one aspect. Second aspect is the broader markets. Now Sensex is like a 30 stock index, and if you look at broader markets, you can see a lot of opportunities still available at reasonable valuations. So one need not to be a little unnerved about just only this graph, but they have to see the fact that this graph has certain anomalies. But despite that, we know that it's not a clearly, the markets are not in a very deep value or buy zone. One has to be very careful of what he's buying and at what prices is he buying. Next slide, please. So this has been the earnings trajectory over last 5-6 years. We have been always saying that earnings have not been keeping pace with the kind of Sensex growth that we are seeing. So the faint blue chart in the background that you see is your Sensex, and these lines that you see are earning estimates of Sensex companies. They always keep falling down. And this is also one of the big differences between what happened in 2004-5 till 2008 and what is happening right now. At that point in time, markets were moving up just the way it is moving up right now, but even the earning upgrades were happening. I remember every quarter earnings used to go up for a lot of companies. This does not happen anymore. It is happening over the last 2 quarters, but because a lot of earnings got cut. So if you look at April 20, a lot of people cut earnings very, very sharply because of 2 factor COVID for FY20 and 22 and 23. That is making a comeback. So there has been a earnings beat over last 2 quarters because of better margins and other things, but that is on a very low base to factor COVID. It's not a very kind of good growth environment still. So this is one thing that really worries about how things are moving without earning growth. How fast or how far can the markets run? And that is the risk that we need to be very, very careful about and choosy about companies which show earnings growth. Next slide, please. Now we'll come to our product called Quantum Long-Term Equity Value product. Most of you would know about this product. I'll just like to go through. I thought it's a good time that I'll kind of revise, and people who are listening for the first time just to understand how the product is managed, what is the process and other things. So Quantum Long-Term Equity Value product was launched in 2006. Typically, the portfolio size is between 25 to 40 stocks. We are sector agnostic. We wherever we see value, we go ahead and buy it. It's kind of a product basket which you like to buy for long-term financial goals like retirement, which is like 10, 15 years away from, assuming that you are 40, 35, 40 years old. Child's education, child's marriage, and wealth creation. So any equity product essentially is good for long term. Near term, below 3 years, any equity product becomes more of a speculative product, and beyond 3-5 years, it's real when it becomes an asset class. We have a very disciplined research and investment process. We have a very low portfolio turnover. We don't churn the portfolio too much so that we don't pay unnecessary excess brokerage. Buy after conviction and hold it for long. We hold shares of cash, no derivatives, no hedging. Can we move to the next slide, Kiran? So this is how our investment process starts. So the team of 12 people, including 4 portfolio managers and 8 analysts, are divided into sectors. What's the whole work of an analyst? As a fund manager, I also don a hat of an analyst. So how we go about is that I have a sector, I have good 15-20 companies to look at. I will evaluate the business of the company. The external environment is extremely important because companies don't operate in a vacuum. We'll meet the management, understand their long-term goals, their philosophy, their focus on financial management. Does the financials support the long-term goals of the management? To put it simply, if somebody wants to grow 50%, does his balance sheet support, or he'll leverage his balance sheet? So that is few things that we try to learn about the business within our sectors. Analyze the companies, look at the stock price based on fundamental and relative value to its peers, history, market. There are different valuation parameters that we'll use: price to earnings, price to cash flows, price to book value, and others. Once we arrived at a fair value of the company, our buy is generally at 40% lower than our long-term estimated value of the company. This is in the case of first buy. Now here a point becomes extremely important, that this is, though we like to buy any company at a 40% discount, but this margin of safety sometimes we don't get in all the companies. So we have to be pragmatic enough that if, when we are looking at long-term PE multiples, when we set a P multiple for a buy, the stock comes to that buy. It is not a theoretical number. We don't want to be have a theoretical number where we want to buy at a discount at 40%. But if the company has not come at 40% discount for 10, 15 years, that makes no point. So we'll try to factor that. We are not a growth investor, so we'll not buy a company at fair value or above fair value. But again, we like to factor a discount, but it's a practical discount that we like to have. On a sell, it is current price. When it's greater than a long-term value which we have derived, we'll try to trim it. Earlier, what we used to do is that once the stock comes to a sell, we used to initiate a sell order. But what we have seen that in this process, sometimes market gives you an opportunity to sell slowly and realize a better price. So we generally now what we do is we do not exit the stock very quickly, but we place orders on smaller frequency and we try to realize a better price once the stock goes above our intrinsic value. If we see a better investment alternatives, also we try to sell. If we have a changed view of management, which there have been few cases of changed view of the management in business, we sell out of a stock. Next slide, please. So our macro assumptions remain very similar. I have explained you when I was explaining you the long-term charts as GDP. So we are a bottom-up research house. We look at companies, we meet managements, and this is how we create a universe of stocks for a portfolio. But then we also have to have a basic input of macro assumptions, because as I said, companies do not work or companies do not operate in a vacuum. So we have to have a common parameter of some macro assumptions to be inputted by the analysts. And the reason that we take these 4 macro assumptions from our macro team is that we want every analyst to look India from a same perspective, same lens. It is not, it will be very unprudent. So if an auto analyst thinks India could grow at 8%, but a cement analyst thinks that India could grow at 2%. To have that consistency, we take these inputs from our macro team. Next slide, please. So clearly a bottom-up selection process. Our first filter is we like to have companies which offer a minimum liquidity threshold. So about 4 out of 4,000 odd listed companies in India, maybe 3,500 or 4,000. First, we filter out liquid companies. By liquid, we mean it should trade at $1 million daily for last 1 year average. So once I use that filter, the universe shrinks from 4,000 to about 450 stocks. Then we start to filter out based upon management, corporate governance, quality of business and other things. Companies do not meet. We also remove those companies. Companies with crony capital structure, with a lot of hand holding with the government, we try to remove that. So that universe comes down to about 200 to 25 stocks, and that is what is actively covered by the team. Within that, based upon how stocks are coming to buy and sell, we create a portfolio of 25 to 40 stocks. Next slide, please. Coming to a portfolio construction process, as I told you, stock under active coverage. If the stock is not under active coverage, and we have not discussed that in a research meeting a few times, the stock will go back to the research team so that there is an active research on that. If it's $1 million and it's part of the active research, is it part of Sensex 30? Doesn't matter. If it's part of Sensex 30 or BSE 200, does not matter. We are here to manage an active portfolio. Below buy limit, yes, no, we will wait till the stock comes to a buy limit. Yes, what sector? Portfolio does not matter to us because we are trying to create a diversified portfolio. That's how we create a portfolio of 25 to 40 stocks. Now, coming back to this below buy limit. So we buy stocks below our buy limit because we want that margin of safety. But of late, we have seen that often very high good quality companies, because our research is an ongoing process, every 6 months stock gets updated and researched. Sometimes between that 6 months, the stock comes to a buy. Now, if there is a possibility that the stock is just 5-6% away from a buy. So what we have decided is that till the time the research happens on that stock, And this is for very, very high quality stocks. So very high quality, where we believe the management is extremely great, balance sheet is extremely fine. We have taken a leeway of about 5 to 6% above buy. So we are okay with buying the stocks 5 to 6% above our buy limit, because we don't want to miss the opportunity to buy into that stock, because of this gush of liquidity. What we have seen is that sometimes markets move too fast and we miss out the opportunity of buying those names. So that is the reason of buying very high quality names. We have given a kind of a buffer of 5 to 6% so that we can step ahead and buy initial 2%. We'll try to bring the average cost below our buy limit, because we have said after we add on to the position, but initial 2%, we can buy it about 4-5% higher also. Our weights assigned to a stock are a function of reliability of management. So essentially at cost, the minimum weight is 2% for any stock. The maximum is 6%. At market value, it can go up to 10%. Then we start to trim. Now weight between 2 and 6%, the deciding factors would be reliability of management, how good the management is, how it's been history, quality of earnings. By quality means the quality of business, stability of earnings, balance sheet quality, and other things, upside potential on that stock, and alternatives that I have. A mix of these 5 things will decide whether I'll have 2% at cost or 6% at cost. We move to the next slide, please. So how's been the portfolio positioning right now? Monsoon has been good for second consecutive year. Some of the portfolio stocks are geared towards strong agri and rural economy, and we continue to hold them. You can look at our fact sheet and find out those names. High quality stocks with reasonable valuations were added to the portfolio in the correction of Feb March. So that is an extremely good point. Over last 2 years, between 17 and 18 and maybe 19, we were struggling with valuations to buy good quality names. Quality names were very, very expensive. In 2020 Feb March, when the market fell very sharply, we were able to buy quality names, the sector leaders, at good prices. And that really changed things from the portfolio perspective. Otherwise, we are not getting high quality names at good prices, and that's when we got that opportunity to buy into those names. We have a higher weight in NBFC, consumer discretionary, and IT. All the 3 sectors have done well for us over the last 3-5 months. We have, when this whole fall happened and this COVID happened, we also do the very strong stress test of our companies, the balance sheet stress test. We ensured that the companies are strong, but either have a strong balance sheet to survive the cycle. So what we did was operating expenses. So cash in the balance sheet divided by operating expenses, how many months or years that the company survived with 0 revenue. So this is the extreme test we did for the portfolio companies. So we've ensured that the company either have a very strong balance sheet or a strong parentage which can infuse capital whenever required to last the downturn. We have cash to the tune of about 11.5-12%, and it will be used to add new names in case we find a good name or there is a good correction which happens in the market. Next slide. This has been the performance chart. Next slide, please. And this has been the return. Returns have been lagging for last 3 years, last 3-6 months. As the value flavor comes back, things have been improving, but the value style went out of favor in 2017 and 2017. 18 was okay. 19, 17 and 18 have been tough years for us as a fund. Quantum tax saving fund again is runs a very, very similar portfolio. Can you even move to the next slide? So it's a very, very similar portfolio as Quantum Long-Term Equity Value Fund. The only difference is that if you subscribe to this, you get a lock-in of 3 years, but you also get a tax benefit because of this ATC rebate that you get. So that reduces your cost of ownership a substantial amount. So we have repackaged the Quantum Long-Term Equity Value Fund, and we are selling it as, we are telling you it as Quantum Tax Saving Fund. So it's very, very similar portfolio, and contrary to thought process that we generally run a large cap portfolio, that is not the case. About 17% of our invested equity is in mid caps and rest is large caps. So we have a very good mix of quality mid and large caps where we feel comfortable in terms of valuation and quality of business. 3-year lock-in, but one of the lowest lock-ins for any tax products that you see, NSC, Kisan Vikas Patra or PPF, all have more than 5-year lock-in. This is a 3-year lock-in product. ensures a discipline among investors, because a lot of times what happens is that people tend to sell too quickly or too late. So this is a discipline that ELSS product brings in, and it's well suited for besides tax saving, children education, retirement planning, and other things. Next slide, please. So this has been the return for quantum tax saving fund. Yeah, so this gives you a brief of how the returns have been over the last, so about a 15.75% since inception return. Let's move to the next slide, please. I think you can move ahead. So I just thought by summing up, I'll just highlight the risk, because market seems to be on a risk on mode. So what few things that one should keep in mind while looking into equities, and those are the risks that can emerge anytime. Increasing COVID cases in rural areas may slow down economic recovery, and that we are seeing in northern states as the winter set in. That is the risk where the markets are not factoring in, and vaccines for everybody is still some time away. So that is a risk one should be aware of. And if a lockdown happens, that could be a crude shock to equity markets. Job losses among salary employees I've talked about. This can impact consumer discretionary spend, and that is not improving. Government fiscal support has been woefully low. I've been talking that direct support has been just 1.8%, and that's been woefully low. And this might lead to a little more prolonged recovery phase, and our optimum GDP growth rates could come a little late than early. So rally had been relatively concentrated, but investing opportunities lie beyond the index. So beyond the index, there are enough opportunities to buy into them. Long-term outlook remains attractive, but the kind of rally that we had seen in November definitely increases the downside risk, because market is in no mood to factor the risks. Clearly not the time to go overweight in your equity portfolio. Stagger your investments, be slow, and piecemeal investment would be a better idea at this point in time. Resurgent FI flows are there, questioning the impact of faltering retail inflows, but this will continue to happen, and this will give us opportunities at good prices to buy into good names. I think that's about it from my end. Ghazal, we can open up for question and answers.
Thanks, Saurabh. Thanks for that insightful presentation. Yes, we have some questions that have come in from the viewers. Let's start with this. So what are the key selection parameters for a value pick? And can you explain the bottom-up stock selection process in more detail?
Sure. So bottom-up stock selection process, as we told you, and I'll tell you value investing beside after that. So it's very, very simple. There are two ways of investing: top-down and bottom-up, broadly speaking. One way of investing is I like the education sector in India. Let me go ahead and buy an education name which is the largest in India and has the largest market share, or let me pick up some kind of education sector companies in India. So this is a very, very rough example of how top-down investment happens. Now, second is that you feel that, okay, you look at some macro parameters like GDP growth and other things, but your focus is, let me take out the annual report of few companies, let me go through that, look at and understand the businesses, look at and understand the financials. If possible, that is not possible generally for the retail investor, but for institutional investors, they can go ahead and meet the management, understand their philosophy, try to understand how business will look in 3 to 5 years, what are the opportunities, what are the risks, create a model, if not on paper or Excel sheet in your mind, that how business will look in next 3, 5, 7 years. Based upon this, arrive at a value of a business, and based upon that value, whether you want to invest at the fair value or at what kind of discount are you comfortable to buy into that company. So that is how roughly I can explain a top-down investing process and a bottom-up investing process. So here is more of meeting, reading and other things, not looking at large global macro and theme-based investing. That is not the idea. So if PLI and export is the theme, it's not that I'll go ahead and pick up few exporting names. That is not the idea over here in bottom-up investing. From a value style perspective, the only difference between growth investing and value investing is that whether you want to pay a premium to that growth, or you believe that if you can wait, you can get the stock at your price, at your margin of safety. Now, what margin of safety does to you is that if you go wrong, now please understand we are trying to look into future whenever you are investing into equities or equity stock. And future is dynamic, right? And nobody has a crystal ball. So if you buy something at a below intrinsic value, then you have that margin of safety of affording to go wrong a little bit. Right? So that is the reason value investing makes a little more sense, so that you can preserve your capital. Growth investing tends to be a little more risky. You pay a premium to growth, assuming that the growth will give you return. Here, the difference that you have from an intrinsic value where you are buying, so that's margin of safety, that is one set of return, and growth or a catalyst which plays out, that is the second set of return that you get in value investing. But yes, you have to be patient. It is very similar to going to the mall, liking a dress and going and buying it at MRP, or wait for a discount period post monsoon and wait for, and that stock is that dress is available for you still, you go ahead and buy that dress at a good price. Your consumer surplus will be higher. That's the whole idea.
Wonderful. Thanks, Saurabh. So, Saurabh, on what basis and when does a value fund exit stocks?
So as I explained in my process, sorry, the intrinsic, when you achieve intrinsic value, this is the fair value of the company that you have received, you have achieved. So that is the time that you should relook at the fundamentals of the company again, whether there are catalysts enough so that you have to change the intrinsic values. Look, so the intrinsic value of a company is never constant. Over years, it will change. If the company is doing better, it will increase. If it's not doing good, it might decrease also. So it's a dynamic process. So revise your assumptions of the companies. You bought a company for 2 years, maybe God willing, it has doubled in 2 years. That is not the reason you should sell. Go ahead, again, look at numbers, look at fundamentals, try to find out whether the intrinsic value of the company has changed. There will be some time value of money, that accretion also that will happen. Look into those factors. You still believe that it's a good value, you continue to hold it. If you believe that it's overshot its value, you sell it.
Sure. Saurabh, would you say a value fund is a good match for a low risk or a conservative investor?
So equity inherently is volatile. So let me tell you, risks are of two types. One is the statistics risks that we have. So standard deviation, volatility, beta. These are risk definitions of a statistician, that if your portfolio returns is X and your returns over a period moves between X plus 1 and X minus 1, that is a risk for you. But for a long-term investor, we believe the risk is getting into bad company and a bad stock and have to take a loss on your capital. That is the key risk, writing off the capital. So I think that is the risk that you need to factor. And as a value manager, our primary importance is that we don't get into that second kind of risk. So risk from a volatility perspective, could possible that some stocks have a little more volatility, but do I have a risk of losing my capital? That is the idea that we try to minimize. So that is the reason that within equity investing, value styles tends to be a little more less risky, but overall equity are volatile. One should understand that.
Sure. Sir, what are your views on the stock market rally? Is this sustainable?
Now, as I said, that index looks expensive, and a 10-11% rally in a month definitely is kind of nervousing. But there are 2 or 3 factors here. One is the interest rates or the liquidity that comes in from overseas, because now about 30% of global bonds are yielding negative. And when you come to India, you have a 2.5%, at least 2%, 1.5% dividend yield. You have good growing companies. A GDP could move back to 5.5%, and a nominal GSEC yield of 5 to 6%. So India will continue to gain fair share of the liquidity that comes from outside. And we believe that we need to keep that in mind. That is one. As of now, this is not the time to go whole hog in equities, because things have been moving very, very fast, until unless you can find out some pockets of value beyond the index. So this is clearly not the time to put your money in an index ETF or something like that, because that looks valued. But an active manager who can find out yourself, or your active manager can find out pockets of value, then you can create a portfolio and hold on for a longer period of time.
All right.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Sir, is this the right time to invest in the Quantum Long-Term Equity Value Fund? Is its recent uptick in performance going to last for a longer period of time?
So as I told you, there are 2 or 3 changes that we have done, and there are 2 or 3 changes that external environment we are seeing that is happening. Changes that I told you within internally what we have done or what has happened in the portfolio is that March has given us opportunities to buy into market or sector leaders. Some of the companies we would have loved to be part of the portfolio, but we were unable to buy because of their valuations. Those have come into the portfolio, and if you look at last 3-6 months, those companies have started to do well from the portfolio perspective. So portfolio is much more robust than what I can say what it was about a year ago from a portfolio perspective. Secondly, we have tried to build a little more headroom of buying into companies, very good high quality companies with a 5% leeway above the buy price. So this gives us a little more headroom. So that is some tweaks on the process that we have done, which we believe that can add value to the investor. And slow selling. So we believe, and this is all data backed. We have an analytics team which tells us that where have been we losing a value where we could have saved some value or some return for the investors, and though based upon those inputs we have made those changes. So those are some internal changes that we have done. Thirdly, as I told you, first time in 3-4 years, I'm looking at a economic recovery that looks a little more broad based. It is not that one sector or one company is doing well. What we are seeing is that commodities have started to do well. We are seeing that IT technology, which was not doing that great, is started to improve. Pharma has come back. A lot of sectors have started to improve in terms of performance, and the earning growth have started to, looks like we are on a cusp of a cyclical recovery. And when that happens, you will see that more catalysts, what we expect to companies to have when you have done your value investing, to play out, and the fund or the value starts to do well. One important factor is inflation. Now, when inflation comes back, your interest rate cycle will be normalized and not suppressed the way it has happened in last 5-7 years. So that also believe that there will be a cyclicality coming back the way it happened between 2000 and 2008. So my sense is this should continue. We'll be having a very close watch on these variables, whether they are continuing or not continuing. But as of now, seems to be things seems to be falling in place for value managers.
Sure. Sir, our investors want to know your views specifically on the pharma sector.
Yeah, so pharma sector has come back very, very strongly thanks to this whole COVID thing. And there are 2 or 3 triggers that are playing out within the sector. One is when we picked up, we have 2 pharma names in the portfolio. And when we picked up, nobody were looking at that sector about 1.5-2 years ago. We had a fair share of drag for about 1 year. The stocks were not doing that great, but that has been taken care of within 1 year or last 1 year. Now, 2 or 3 things have happened within pharma. Now look at equities. Equities always look at things in a relative term. A 5% growth by a pharma company was not exciting when it was compared to an NBFC, which was growing at 40%. Right? Now, this year, when most companies will grow at 0% or minus 5% or 2%, suddenly that 5-6% of the return looks good. Right? From a relative perspective, pharma looks better. That is one. Now, this COVID thing and what we are hearing out from pharma companies, that there is some ease on FDA approvals that are happening from US. So that has been a big problem for pharma companies, and that event risk, which we were finding very difficult to factor, that suddenly there will be a FDA inspection and there will be some notices and the plant could shut down. That seems to be waning away. That is the third aspect that is, the second aspect that has improved for pharma companies overall. The third aspect, what I understand is that this whole pharma and specialty chemical value chain looks much better vis-a-vis people want to diversify from China. So here I'm not talking about formulation makers, but even technical makers or inputs to pharma companies. Those companies which have a value chain or backward integration should do well, because this whole people want to de-risk from China, and anybody who has a strong kind of back end from the whole value chain should do well in this environment. So those are 2-3 factors that we believe should be a catalyst for pharma companies, and it seems to be playing out right now.
Thanks, sir. You did mention that you're looking at a broad-based recovery, but if you had to pick three sectors, which would be your top three picks?
Look, so every sector has its own nuances, and what we believe is that IT, we believe there are few catalysts that are happening on cloud side, plus the way the companies have delivered despite lockdowns, despite they have been shifting 100,000 people to work from home in matter of weeks and without missing a delivery milestone. And inputs that we are getting from how demand for IT services has increased, we believe that is one sector that should sustain a little higher growth that we are comfortable about. On the discretionary side, consumer discretionary, interest rate is playing a good role. So now we believe that that cycle, here the caveat is that unemployment rate should not shoot up or should actually start to decline as economic recovery happens. So consumer discretionary, second sector that we believe that should do well, besides technology. So those would be my two sectors. Rest, I think, within other sectors, there are companies which are standing out and should improve in terms of performance. And banking is one sector which is, we believe, a little confusing right point in time. As of now, we started with a very negative, with a lot of moratoriums happening, people fearing a lot of NPAs. Last 2-3 months, that stress has been easing out, and even the short-term rates have fallen, so things are a bit easy for financials. But then next 3 months, we have to see, because till now there was a moratorium window by RBI, and you could not restructure or you could not write off things as describe things as NPA because of the Supreme Court decision that came up. So things will really come to the fore in next 2-3 months. So one has to be careful on that sector. As of now, appears to be okayish, well capitalized. Most of the banks have raised capital, but that is one joker in the pack when you have to see if you can pick the third sector.
Sure. So for a short to medium term investor, does it make sense to invest in value funds or growth funds?
Look, we've always said that you should have a basket of products. Because it always happens that if you look at last 6 months, growth funds are not done well. And nothing taking away from the fact that over last 3 years, they did extremely well and the value funds were not doing well, right? So the idea is to diversify the style risk. Our view is that you create a basket of a good mid cap, large cap, a good value growth kind of mix. Generally, we do not suggest a lot of sector specifics until unless you are an expert to that sector. But within diversified equity, create a basket of different products, different styles. And we believe that that is the way you can achieve your financial goal nirvana. That is a much better way, because there could be periods of 1 year, 3 year, 6 months where certain style does not perform, or a mid cap does not perform, and nothing wrong with that fund manager's problem, that the market structure has changed for some time, right? And that fund manager either can change his style, which is much more risky because he's not attuned to do that. Better idea would be, instead of being anxious about your whole money going into a fund and that not doing well for 1 year, 2 year, you should have a basket of products. That is a much better idea.
Wonderful. So what are your views in the mid cap and small cap space? What are you expecting on that front going forward?
So mid caps, as we said, we have about 17% of my fund, our fund allocation towards mid caps. And look, what happens is that in an economic recovery, generally the funds, when the broader economy starts to do well, at that point in time, smaller companies gain their strength, and not only the market leaders or larger companies, smaller companies start to do well. So in case of an economic recovery and sustainable economic recovery, which we believe is still some time away, we have to wait till that point when really the small caps start to do really, really well. So because those are smaller companies, where mortality of companies are higher, their ability to handle downturns is a lot lower. There are much more risk compared to a larger company, their ability to handle risk. So we believe that having a portfolio larger bias in an economic uncertain environment is much better. A bias towards a larger cap companies which are more, and ability to handle the stress is much better. That is a better idea. Once you're convinced that this economic cycle is going up and it is sustainable, that at that point in time, your small cap companies start to do well.
Do you think there'll be an expansion of PE multiples with more foreign funds chasing Indian equities compared to the previous decade?
So that has been a debate internally that we are having, and we are also contemplating how things would change, whether the interest rate cycle will normalize or not. Now, here again, the wild card is the inflation. Last year, last whole decade, if you see, despite a lot of liquidity and lower interest rate, inflation did not come back. Now, if inflation has to come back, interest rates have to go up, right? So that is where we are also wondering whether that will happen or not. As of now, with the way commodities have rallied, inflation could make a comeback. But yes, from a relative perspective, the relative attractiveness of Indian yields and Indian growth rate, we will have disproportionate share of flows. That's for sure. Impact on P multiples, uh, last 3 years, there has been an impact. But before that, I think if you wait for some time, if you have patience, you will get enough opportunities to buy stocks at your price, at your P multiples as well.
Thanks. Sir, what is the difference between your ELSS and the QLTF portfolios?
So the portfolios are very, very similar. The only difference, if in return, if you see since inception, return would be different because QTSF, the tax saving product, came about much later than the QLTF, which was started in 2006. Besides that, we try to keep the portfolio very, very similar. So portfolio is almost a mirror image. The only difference is that cash limitations on tax saving is I cannot go beyond 20% cash. And there have been times in QLTF where our cash levels have been beyond 20%. So that could be two variations. Besides that, there is not much variations.
Sir, what is your opinion on PSUs since they're trading at attractive multi-year low valuations now?
Yeah, so PSUs over last 3 years have given us fair share of pain, if I can tell you that. We also saw a lot of value. We have quite a bit of PSUs in the portfolio. 1 or 2 have done well, 2 or 3 have not done well for us. A lot of people have been questioning whether to buy into PSUs. The problem with the PSUs is not the business, but the largest stakeholder, the government, and the flip-flopping policies that the government does. There are two things that took out the win from PSU returns. One was flip-flop on policies and the capital misallocation or uncertainty on the cash flows, how the companies would be using those cash flows. So India's largest oil and gas company had to buy oil marketing companies because the government wanted money to take care of its fiscal deficit. So those are the risks that PSUs carry. Despite we being factoring all those risks, then again, these are risks which can happen here and then. That is one risk. Second is this whole PSU ETF that the government launched, and it continued to supply equity at a 4-5% discount every time, every 3-6 months of different companies. So the supply at lower prices also ensured that the stock prices do not move up over the last 3 years. Now, what has changed is that government over last 3-6 months appear to have taken cognizance of the fact that this is wealth destruction and value destruction. Right? So a lot of feelers that we get from the government and press releases and media reports suggest that they might not issue stocks at discount to these ETFs, these PSU ETFs anymore. So there is a supply overhang which always was there for last 3 years. That should go out. That is one. Second, I think taking cognizance of the fact that taking out cash randomly from the portfolio without giving it benefit to the minority investors to share that cash, it destroys value, right? And the government being the largest shareholder, they are the one who is losing the most. So I think that cognizance started to set in, and till the time I think they will be able to convince. It will take some time for the markets to get convinced that the government is walking the path what it is preaching. The stock should revert back to a little better valuations and closer to fair value. But then again, government is government. That risk always remains. As of now, seems to be that government is behaving a little more sanely on that PSUs.
Sure. So since there is a 3-year lock-in period in the ELSS fund, why mimic a value portfolio? Shouldn't it be slightly more growth oriented?
Look, Look, so agree with that point, but we are value managers. The only reason QTSF was created, that we always preached QTSF, or we tried to tell people that QTSF, long-term equity value product, is a product which you should buy for 3, 5, 7, 10 years. And why not give people have an opportunity to have a tax benefit out of that? So that was the primary reason why we created quantum tax saving fund with a very, very similar portfolio. We being value managers, we are not growth managers, but let me tell you one thing, and value managers are also looking at growth. It is just that we are not willing to pay that premium. I can assure you that our portfolio earnings growth has been better than Sensex stocks earning growth. So it is not that we are not buying into companies which grow. That is a wrong fallacy on value managers. It is just that if something is at 2.5 price to book fair value, I would not give it a premium of 1x and buy it at 4 times price to book, because as of now it is growing at 40%. That is the only difference. So it's a wrong anomaly that value managers don't buy growing companies.
Sure. Saurabh, Quantum Value Fund still has a higher exposure to the automobile sector, and hence returns are low compared to other value funds. Your comments on this?
So I think last 6 months, it's the consumer discretionary or the auto portfolio which has stand out for us. And that has done really, really well. I told you about interest rate sensitivities playing out, and we managed to pick one of our stronger two-wheeler names in March. That has played out good. One of the two-wheeler that we have as a good exposure. Actually, two auto companies have a very strong exposure towards agri. We believe it will do well. So we continue to believe that these companies are extremely robust, generate a lot of cash flows, valuations are extremely good, and the business opportunities are also good. And the way things are happening in these companies, in terms of one of the auto companies telling that they will be more focused on capital allocation, we believe these companies should do well. I think last 6 months, these companies have done very well for us.
Right. Does value investing increase portfolio turnover compared to investing in high quality companies?
Look, ideally not. It's not that we are trying to trade here. Just that once we know that something is way beyond its fair value, we would like to trade. Now, buy and hold is one strategy where people believe you can buy expensive name. Even if it becomes expensive, you continue to hold. We have enough examples that if you don't trip at the right time and at a certain valuations, it can give you a lot of pain for a large period of time. And there are enough examples in the market for that. I don't think so that is true, because if you look at our turnover, it's 20%. So once a stock comes into the portfolio, average, it is there in the portfolio for 4 or 5 years. So I wouldn't agree to that thesis. At least I'm not aware of the data the person is referring to with this turnover ratio. I think we will be, in terms of portfolio churn, we would be the lowest in the industry, one of the lowest in the industry.
Sure. Sir, what are your views on penny stocks for value investing?
Penny stocks are very speculative. I really don't know. It is like, crudely, it's like gambling. If you don't know what the company does, it's just that it is available at 2 rupees, let us buy it. Please understand, if you're putting 10,000 rupees, it is still 10,000 rupees. If you buy it 1 rupee stock, or you buy 10 rupee stock, or 1,000 rupee stock, right? Your exposure is not 1 rupee, your exposure is 10,000 rupees. So please be careful. I've not seen a lot of people make a lot of money on penny stocks. It's more of a luck game than an analytical game. So unless you are expert on that, not many people are, I am not. So one has to be very careful on the penny stock side. That is not value investing. I can tell you that cheap and value is a big difference.
Sure. What's your suggested allocation between domestic and global stocks?
So that depends upon understanding. We believe that domestic portfolios, domestic equity market still gives a lot of opportunities. So why venture out and invest into global stocks, which we have a little less understanding on as an investor? I'm not talking about as a house. That is one. Secondly, you take a currency risk. And within India also, if you sit down in India and look at companies, there are enough companies which can help you take exposure of global stocks. So look at IT sector. Essentially, IT sector is not about Indian growth. Pharma sector is not about India. It's more about the outlook on US and other ways, right? So if you buy into Indian IT services, they're as good as buying into global outlook or US outlook. Similarly with pharma, you'll have companies which have 50-60% of their revenues coming from Japan. Just have to wait, find out those companies, and you can get an exposure of those companies if you want to diversify out of India. I think gold is one product which is very good diversification of an India risk, which also helps you garner some currency gains. And for a typical retail investor, that is one of the big avenues of diversifying out of India risk if you ever want to. So I think gold is a better choice, but unless you've developed an understanding of foreign investing, global investing, you should not venture out just because your neighbor or your friend is doing so and has made some quick returns.
Sure. Sir, what's your opinion on high dividend paying companies that pay out consistently?
They're always good, and all the PSU names that we have in the portfolio, they are like good 4-5% dividend yield companies, and we have earned a lot of dividend out of them. And 4 to 5% dividend is a fairly good number to have in an environment where your FD rates are 4.5-5%. So it's a fairly good number. One has to be sure that the company can sustain its cash flows. Sometimes we've seen a few companies where, as of now, the dividend yield looks very, very attractive, but going forward, if the cash flows start to dwindle, that the dividend that you're expecting to receive will not come. So please ensure that those sustainability of cash flows are there in the company, even if it is not growing, the current level of cash flows are sustained. And then you can really look at dividends. So it's always a good idea to get into a dividend yield companies, but sustainable dividend.
Sure. Sir, does an ELSS product also help in wealth creation along with tax saving? And what is the better way to go about investing in ELSS, lump sum or SIPs?
So either of the ways, you will be logged in for 3 years. So even lump sum is a good enough opportunity. Most people do it in March. That is not a good idea, I sense. Start looking at the markets from April. It is very difficult, I understand. Try to start. You should have a SIP which is ongoing. But if you see a good opportunity, you should put your money. Should not wait till March, because most people end up buying ELSS in March. That's what I see in QTSF. A lot of fund flows come in March. That's not a great idea. Start planning from April. Start an SIP, and eventually over the year, if you get within a year that you get an opportunity to buy into, you can buy into on a dip to create a portfolio. Since you have a 3-year lock-in, mostly your chances of going wrong with 3 years of investing is a lot lesser than maybe a 1-year investing period.
All right. So we're getting a lot of questions on the FMCG space. So if you could just share your views on that sector.
FMCG space has been a mirage for our portfolios. Being value managers, is very difficult to buy into companies which are trading at 65-70 times. Last 6 months, they've not done well. Seems to be changing towards more value. But they are great companies, good cash generating companies. We really like some of those, but we believe that those valuations are prohibitive. And at 65-70 times buying into companies, then expecting a returns of equity returns of 14-15% becomes challenging. Yes, so over the last 2 years, the 40 PE has become 60 PE, 60 PE has become 75 PE. But we believe that one has to give some credit to the valuations as well. But whenever we get these companies at valuations of our comfort, and by our comfort, that we are ready to pay a premium. We are not trying to buy these companies dirt cheap at Sensex PE or any other company PE. A reasonable premium we are ready to pay, but not at 70 times PE. So valuations, besides valuations, I believe that this is a very good sector too, and which has a sustainable growth rate, which will continue.
All right, wonderful. So with that last question, we've come to the end of the Q&A. Thank you again, Saurabh, for patiently answering all these questions. I will now request you for your closing comments.
Thank you everyone to actually listen out, to coming out, sparing some time on a Friday evening. Though in COVID days, not much to do and not much partying to do. So thank you for all of you to listen out to us and our views, and please feel free to write into us. I think most of you can get into our customer care and others. Any specific questions on funds or equity markets, please tune into our RMs or our customer care and others, and we'll happy to answer all the questions. Thank you. Thanks for listening out patiently. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Saurabh. On that note, we'll conclude the webinar now. We hope this webinar added value to your investment journey, and thanks everyone for joining. Good night.
Thank you, Ghazal. Thank you, everyone.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.